There are snacks that can lower your blood sugar, and ones that particularly work well if you're diabetic. Now, snacking is not always the answer. Okay? A lot of times snacking adds to the problem. You're snacking on foods that are just contributing to blood sugar spikes on top of blood sugar spikes on top of blood sugar spikes. So you can see how that could definitely be an issue. However, there are also snacks that serve a very solid purpose. So one snack that is unique that I would definitely recommend is going to be chickpeas or chickpea snacks. There's enough brands out there now that they really do make them taste good. Now granted, sure, you can find ones that have sugar added and some that have a bunch of maltodextrin and other stuff, but there's also ones that are just salt flavored and simple and easy. There's plenty of brands out there, I don't need to name names. Here's the research behind chickpea snacks. There was a study published in the journal Food Science and Technology that took equal amounts of carbohydrates and calories in bread or chickpea snacks. Same amount of carbohydrates, same amount of calories. Okay, what they found is that the chickpea snack group had massive reductions in blood sugar. In this case, they saw a 29 to 36% reduction in blood sugar. So we're talking a pretty significant drop. But even more importantly, there was an 83 to 98% decrease in the amount that they wanted to eat the next meal. So it's a snack that is potent, that can work well on its own. And it has to do with the unique combination of soluble fiber and protein. Sometimes you just hit the mark with those ratios just right. So that is a snack that if you are insulin resistant or diabetic, you should feel comfortable snacking on. Now the next one is going to be kefir, or kefir, depending on how you like to say it, but technically it's kefir. Now with kefir, what's interesting about it is there's really no sugar in it. You've got a little bit of the lactose, a little bit of the milk sugar, but realistically, it's fermented to such a degree that the sugar is down a little bit than it would be in typical milk, but it's not about the short-term response. It's more about the long-term effect. First of all, if you drink a quarter cup or a half a cup of kefir, it probably will bring your glucose levels down. The fat content is high enough, it's satiating, probably feel good. But what we forget is that the actual probiotic effect of kefir is very potent when it comes down to longer-term glucose stabilization. When we have a more diverse microbiome, we can modulate glucose better. And this is demonstrated all the time in data. This is not just me talking out of the side of my mouth. You can see it in the research where longer term, more diverse microbiomes are associated with lower levels of glucose and more stable glucose and better response with insulin, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting about kefir is it's really one of the only foods that's been studied extensively and has a solid stamp of research approval to really be a legit probiotic food. Even sauerkraut, even kombucha, there's no real data to back up that they're probiotic and actually add benefit to your gut. Whereas kefir and yogurt and dairy that's fermented is really the only stuff we have legit data on. It doesn't mean the other stuff doesn't work, but the actual solid data is there. The next snack is going to be protein powder. Processed as processed can get, right? Well, the bottom line is that it's a snack that has an effect. Now, if you're looking at whey protein or plant-based protein powder, what happens is the protein is instantized in such a way that it can actually bring your glucose levels down. You see, protein triggers the insulin spike, but since there's no glucose coming in with it, the insulin spike actually drops your blood glucose levels a little bit. There's a counter-regulatory hormone called glucagon that kind of helps find a balance. But a lot of times, if you were to have, say, a whey protein shake or a plant-based protein shake, and your blood glucose levels were moderately high, you would probably see a drop after having that. Because the insulin spike from the protein, which is insulinogenic, drops your glucose a little bit because it opens the cell doorway. So it's an interesting little hack to try out. Now, whey protein is very insulinogenic, but it can also be problematic for people. Not everyone digests it. I popped a link down below for SunWarrior. They have a protein called their Active line. SunWarrior has been a sponsor on my channel for a long time, so it's a very apropos spot for me to put a link to them. So the cool thing about it is they have enzymes and probiotics in their formula, and it's a pumpkin seed protein predominantly, which is a very well-researched protein, which I find to be very easy on the gut. So as far as plant-based protein powders, which I switch it up, I do both. I do whey protein, then I'll do plant-based. Almost every other day I flip-flop it just because I want different benefits and different effect. So that link down below is a 20% off discount link. So it gets you 20% off whatever you want from SunWarrior actually, but I'm predominantly talking about their active line protein because it makes the most sense. Their chocolate is amazing. Their vanilla is quite good too, but I'm a chocolate guy. So anyway, that link is down below. Recommend you try it. Try it as a snack, try it with a meal, try it just to increase the protein because protein is king when it comes down to controlling glucose anyway. So link down below. The next one is Seaweed Snacks. This is one of the best snacks that you could ever eat. Now, I don't care if it has a little bit of maltodextrin on it, okay, if it's got like a little bit of the wasabi flavoring, like come on, like live a little, like you're eating a seaweed snack, right? Like, so seaweed snacks are interesting. The fiber that is in a seaweed snack is very unique. So even when you look at the label of a seaweed snack, you're like, it doesn't show much fiber. This isn't really gonna do much. But the kind of fiber that's in it is called a beta-glucan. A beta-glucan is unique because it is a type of fiber that is basically a bunch of glucose molecules bound together, like 250,000 glucose molecules bound together. And what happens is we cannot break that bond with the enzymes we have in our body. So when it goes into our gut, it has to get broken down by our gut bacteria, and it's a very long process, and it really proliferates bacteria well in our body. But that's not the big reason. The big reason is that seaweed snacks contain alpha amylase inhibitors and alpha glucosidase inhibitors. These are the two enzymes that are really required for breaking down carbohydrates into ultimately monosaccharides and breaking down into the glucose molecules. So when we slow down the enzymatic function, we slow down how quickly these glucose molecules can get into our bloodstream. So when you combine a seaweed snack with another carb, it's phenomenal. And I've talked about this in other videos, but like combining with rice or something like that, like in seaweed or like in sushi, that's huge, right? It has a big impact. So adding nori and stuff like that could be very, very, very beneficial for you. This next one is a wild card. Things with tapioca starch. I have something I need to personally say about tapioca. I have a feeling that we are walking a very, very close edge to starting to develop a problem with tapioca because it's in everything. We're having like overconsumption of it, which I never think is a good thing. I think that's one of the issues that we ran into with wheat. This is me talking, not science, okay? Like I've seen this kind of stuff going on in other categories. We have so much consumption of wheat that we ultimately are developing issues with wheat, and you kind of see that in some of the research. I think we're walking a close knife's edge to developing that same issue with tapioca because we've been putting tapioca in things to sort of substitute wheat, and we might be creating them another problem. So yes, tapioca is gluten-free. It's great. You know, it's derived from cassava. I think cassava is great. We have a big problem with tapioca though, and that is the fact that tapioca is very high glycemic. So even though it's gluten-free, it's high glycemic. But when you look at the data, it doesn't really add up with that. There's a study published in Nutritional Sciences that had subjects consume 50 grams of glucose or varying amounts of tapioca starches. The tapioca starches actually lowered plasma glucose levels. Better yet, it reduced serum insulin levels. And what we've ultimately discovered is that tapioca has resistant starches in it. So even though it's higher glycemic overall, the resistant starches, when they really add up, ultimately slow down digestion collectively over the course of a day. So even though you might eat straight like a tapioca chip or a cracker that's predominantly tapioca starch, you might see a high glycemic spike, high spike. Over the course of the day, it might actually help because of the overall inability to break down those resistant starches. So what I want you to do is when you look at foods, if the tapioca starch is in the first few ingredients, I want you to be okay with it as long as there's not a lot of sugar. Obviously, there's caveats, like tapioca starch plus a ton of sugar, not good. But if tapioca starch is the primary constituent, you might want to see what it does to your glucose. Try to kind of isolate variables a little bit so you can see if that has a positive impact. You might be pleasantly surprised. It's pretty darn cool. Now, obviously, this is just 5 things, but these are 5 things that we're seeing new research on. And I hope that it helps teach you a few things that you can add back into your life to enjoy things that are savory, that have some satisfaction value to you, but also help modulate your glucose. I'll see you tomorrow.